Okay. Hi there, Tracy. Fantastic to have you on the show today. Built, trusted, chosen. Can you just briefly introduce yourself and tell us who you are, where you come from?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Traci Austin, and I am in Wisconsin. And we work with organizations to really create teams where folks want to stay while elevating organizations. Because when we have the right people in place, you can deliver on your customer promise. So that's what we do with a lot of construction and manufacturing organizations.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. And so you speak of the four levers oftentimes. I'm really curious for you to dig into that a little bit and how that
Yeah,
supports construction
yeah.
companies. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we find is that there's 4 levers of engagement, right? And so I want you to like picture yourself right now. Why are you at the company that you're at? What has you stay there? Because really at the end of the day, you as the listener are the judge of if this is true or not versus anything I say, right? But here's what we find is the first is fit to role, meaning are you in the job that you are uniquely designed to do that you're great at? So let me give you an example of that, right? We have some folks that are amazing salespeople that can go out and sell, ice to Eskimos in Alaska. I hope they don't because that's unethical, but you get what I'm saying, right? And then we have the folks that are incredible about building the thing, whether it is preformed concrete, whether it is framers, whether it is our excavation folks. They're amazing at going in and doing the thing and seeing the impact of what they do every day when they walk out, because there's a difference between when I walked in, we had 0 doors framed. When I walked out, we had, 75, and they were done to this level of quality, right? So, are the folks in your organization, including yourself, in the right role? That's lever number 1. Any questions, Wes, or do you want me to keep going?
Well, let's unpack that a little bit. So, getting people in the right role. How do you go about doing that? I suppose when there's a job opening and you interview somebody, they'll say all the right perceived answers for that specific role, but they may not. How do you find out if they're genuine or not, or they're just giving you the answers they feel you want to hear?
I know, isn't that the $1,000,000 question? Yeah.
Man.
So there's really 3 things that we look at when we're interviewing. And yes, we do use like somewhat of a scoring rubric, because if we don't know what we're hiring for, we're going to hire warm bodies. And warm bodies are typically not going to be the right fit to role. So there's 3 areas that we look at within fit to role. The first one is of course the job, which is typically what we all interview for: knowledge, skills, and abilities. Do they have the knowledge to do it? Do they have the skills to do it? Do they have the ability to do it? The problem with that is just because they can do it does not mean that they will do it. Right?
Hate that.
So, yes, it's still a part of what we're looking at, and it's still a third of that. But the second thing that we look at is the culture, right? What is the culture of your organization? And a lot of times when I'm talking with folks, they're kind of like, well, what do you mean our culture? And how we define culture is your culture is the behaviors that you allow or don't allow inside of your organization. So, do you allow folks to do incredible work and reward them for that? And that's going to look like there's actually a metric that you're tracking throughout the day, right? Another behavior could be somebody throws, a come along across the yard. Is that a behavior that you allow? If it is, you're creating a very specific culture that probably isn't very safe and probably a little bit intimidating, right? Whereas
Yeah.
on the other side, we're creating a culture around metrics and the reason why behind it. And we're having conversations around, hey, how many doors do we get framed? Did we do that because, with folks that want to be working with us, right? There's different things that we can do. So that's the culture piece. So that's the second part of fit to role. The third part of fit to role is looking at our natural behaviors. And we use an assessment for this. There's a ton of them out there. We use predictive index. And what it's saying is we're saying, hey, here's the job. So we do an assessment on the job looking at behaviors. Do they need to be detail oriented? Are they going to work through the team versus lead the team? Do they need to be process oriented? Meaning, are they an individual that's going to do item A, then item B, then item C, then item D? Guess what? As craftspeople, typically we want the process orientation, right? So we're very specifically looking at those natural behaviors and then we're matching those together. So for fit to role, it's the natural behavioral fit to the job, it's the knowledge, skills, and abilities as the fit to the job, and then it's the culture of the organization as aligned to the individual's personal values, which shows up in behaviors.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And so I work with trades and construction businesses as well from a different aspect. We do websites and SEO and all that kind of fun stuff as a digital agency. But I'm often hearing from the clients we serve that they just find it incredibly difficult to get anybody in the roles at the moment. And it might be most of our clients are Australian based. We've got clients everywhere, but the ones I chat to the most are in Australia. And what does it take to build a culture that attracts the very best A grade sort of workers? I mean, there's people who can facilitate a role, but how do you get the very, very best when there's a limit in in
Mhm.
who's applying and so on?
Yeah. And so the answer you're not going to like is it's not a quick fix, right? And as you're in marketing, reputation has a huge impact on clients choosing the organization along with the visibility of that organization. So often I kind of laugh and say HR is really marketing for people versus, for that organization. And so when you think about those marketing strategies, it's going to be a lot of the same things as you're attracting folks to the organization. So, look at your Glassdoor ratings. I don't know if it's the same kind of thing in Australia as it is in the US, but those are things that we're definitely looking at to say, hey, your reputation as an employer does precede you. And we do and suggest that you do these kind of climate or pulse surveys with your staff, asking them, why do you work here? Why do you
Yeah.
stay? How likely is it that you'll, look to leave? And what's really interesting is just from the climate surveys, I can tell you pretty closely what percentage of turnover you're going to have that year,
Yeah.
because of the sentiment around the employer. But that information then tells us what we need to focus on and why. Like we just did one with a client, and it was that folks didn't see an opportunity to grow within the organization. They felt the integrity of the owner was there. They absolutely loved the work that they were doing, but they didn't see a growth opportunity. They saw that the role that they were in was the only role that they could do. So we started to implement some strategies to retain these folks by laying out different opportunities for growth in their role and what it would look like to step into the next role.
Do you find that's a certain type of person that is growth focused? And some people just want to roll and they want to roll out the same work that they've always done. They don't really necessarily want the growth aspect. Is it a different type of personality? And do you need to treat these types of people differently in that context?
So we're always going to have folks that don't want to grow. And here's the
Yeah.
thing. There's two types of growth. We can have growth that is through the organization into different levels. Do we need everyone to grow into different levels? The answer is no, we don't. We need, especially in trade organizations, we need the folks that are going to be consistent and steady and have integrity and do the work every single day and love it.
Yeah.
About 75% of, our workforce on the line, whether it's, in a backhoe, framing, electrician, plumber, whatever it is, we need
Mhm.
them in those roles. So, do we need them to grow to higher level positions? Absolutely not. Do we need them to keep up with technology and how AI aligns to it and their certifications and some
Yeah.
communication stuff and, how to write, a somewhat decent email at times and how to have some conversations if
Yeah.
somebody walks up to them on a job site? Yeah, we need that. But those are two very different types of growth.
Yeah, I suppose that speaks to what you were talking about before and getting the right people in the right roles and so on. So there's a career trajectory for some that need that, but the others that just want to be really great at what what their skill is,
Yeah.
which is really important to have that balance.
Yeah.
Um, and what would you say with the growth mindset type people? I guess they get to a point in which if they're really growth hungry, they're probably looking to eventually start their own business as well. So those really great people you potentially will lose eventually, won't you? I suppose. Is that a fair assumption?
I think it really depends. Starting your own firm is a very different type of profile that we see, and it takes a very different type of ambition than moving into leadership positions or some others, right? And
Yeah.
so if we kind of take a look at this and say what retains folks inside of the organization, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times that is the leader that they're specifically working with. A lot of times that is that opportunity to grow in and through the organization. And that growth could look like, hey, I am not a people leader, but I'm definitely a project leader, right? So I don't want to manage people, but I'm really good at managing the data and the projects and the estimating and and the flow in and out and all of those things. Why I just blinked on that, I'm not really sure. But, when we look at that, it's really important to know what that fit to role looks like. Yes, for an entry level position, but where do they want to go over time? So there's two questions I love to ask, and I hope that your listeners take this and ask this in, some one-on-ones or on an annual basis. And the first question is, what is a work bucket list item that you'd like to accomplish this year? So, like, as we're going into 2026. So, Wes, I want to ask you, Wes, what's a work bucket list item that you'd love to accomplish at Uplift 360 in 2026?
Yeah, well, I'm focused on this podcast. It's new. I've done a couple of interviews now already, and looking to release in the new year. So hit the year with a big bang, and hopefully build that audience. I just enjoy it a lot. It's keeping me motivated with what I do as a business, which I've done for a long time now, and to understand our clientele a bit better because we work with trades and construction. So bringing other insights into my world so I understand them a whole lot better and can potentially serve them at a greater level.
Amazing. So, and I'm going to share a couple just so it resonates with your listeners. When we ask this of our clients, some of it, like, here's some examples of what we got back. I want to become asbestos certified. I want to go into the apprenticeship program. I want to, get my CDL. So these are things that we're hearing. And what that tells you as the leader or the manager is this something that is in their role or not? If it's not,
Mhm.
and it benefits the organization, how do we make it happen? Right. It also tells us a little bit about where that person's head is at into what they want to do that we might not get just in the day to day when they're out in the field 90% of the time and we don't see them. Right. It
Yeah.
also hits the second lever that we talk about in our four levers of engagement, and that's the leader. And so when you as the leader are asking those questions, what you're doing is you're starting to create a space for folks that have them feel heard and listened to and valued,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so when we lead folks, we need to know how to lead them. Some are going to, just want tasks and leave them alone. Some of them need that, public attaboy kind of a thing. Others really need that quality time with that manager. So understanding how we're leading folks is something really important to that organization.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, that's, I suppose for most founder-led businesses, the challenge is we start our businesses, we have our skill set, and this is certainly true for me in my own business, but certainly for a lot of the clients. You start out from the ground up, so you might start as an apprentice, and then you work your way up to fully qualified, and then some sort of management role, and then eventually start your own business. And all you can kind of know is what you've observed, but you also think everyone thinks the same way you do. So that's one of the biggest lessons I had early on in business is to figure out that other people are wired in a certain way, and to be able to build a team to support me the way I did it. And I don't know if it's correct, and you can give me some insights of what you think. I just built the team around allocating aspects of what I did to other people. Is that the way most people go about building out a team, or do you suggest having a really thoughtful organizational chart
Yeah.
and
This
fulfilling
is such
roles,
a
or is it organically evolve? What do you say?
Yeah, well, this is such a good question, and it's the third lever of
Oh,
engagement.
okay,
With
cool.
the
Yeah,
team.
well, let's
I
do it.
love this. We
Yeah.
use much more of a scientific approach. You don't necessarily have to do this, but if you think about it in this framework, it's going to help, right? So, what we do is we say, what strategy is this team executing, right? So, are we in a growth strategy? Are we in a sustaining strategy? Are we in, a research and development strategy? What strategy are we currently in? And it's really important we look at this for the specific teams, right? So some
Mm,
teams are going to have, a strategy, which is the delivery model, right? We're going to deliver high quality work, process and precision, right? So depending upon what that team is delivering, we know that we need different things in that team to make it happen. We still need
mm,
a leader that is going to lead the team. We need somebody that's going to be focused on the results and the detail orientation. And then we're probably going to need many more people that are going to be executing on what that is. Well, those are
mm.
two very different behavioral types that we need, right? So the first
Yeah,
thing we do with a team is we look to say, what is the strategy that we're executing on? And then do we have the right players on the team in order to do that? And if not, do we need to pull up from the bench for this project? Is this when we hire someone next? We need to align it in. And so what
yeah,
it does is it ensures that we don't burn people out. So my guess is, Wes, that there's certain things that you can do, but you don't love to do, especially over a long period of time.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. That I mean, that's the way I looked at it for my own business, and it, right or wrong, that's the way I did it, and the way it's what I see a lot of people doing, and they kind of just go about it the way they saw their previous boss do it. But I'm curious how that works with when you have a really systemized, structured, scientific approach to building out a team. What happens if you find someone's not quite in the right role? Do you adjust the role to fit the person, or do you find a new position for the person, or how do you go about adjusting? People are all unique and different, and they've got
Mm.
strengths and weaknesses. And how much of the role do you adjust to suit them, and how much is it kind of you know prescriptive?
Yeah. So there's an and both to this answer, right? So part of this is clarity of goals. And if we are not clear on what our goals are, and when I say goals, I'm talking about an outcome. So let me just kind of describe a distinction here, real quick. You and I are recording a podcast right now, right? That's an output. We did a podcast. Amazing. So
Hmm.
what? Right? The outcome, Wes, you're looking for is that this builds an audience of 100,000 and it converts into 50 new clients in 2026. I totally just made that up, but maybe it's close. So that's the outcome, right? So the output, record podcasts, and the outcome can, reach, impact clients. Those
Hmm.
are two different things. We can't have an outcome without an output, correct?
Yeah,
So when we're looking very specifically at our teams, it's really important that our teams understand what the outcomes are that we're looking for. And
yeah.
that, what I find, does not happen very often. I mean,
Mm.
is it's
Yeah.
like I did 72 doors today. Okay, well, none of them are flush. None of them shut correctly. You didn't hit the outcome, which is the high quality standards that we're looking for within this in the metal doors, not blah, 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 right? And so that clarity is a key piece of this. So that's a key piece we look at when we're putting the team together. And, so just because we don't have an exact match, guess what? We are all individuals that can flex, especially over short periods of time. So
Yeah.
one of the biggest things we look at is how self-aware a person is, right? And, there was a recent study I think it was Harvard, and it was what percentage of folks believe that they're self-aware? 95%. What percentage of folks are actually self-aware? 15%, right? We have
Yeah.
a little bit of a disconnect. The
Yeah, of
predictive
course.
index, if your listeners want to take this, I'm happy to give you a link where they can take it. But it kind of tells you a little bit about your own behavioral strengths. And then that says, okay, I'm really good at persuading folks. I'm not necessarily great at the follow through by a certain date, right?
Mhm.
So if I know that, and I also know for me that's going to be key to my success and that's a job item, guess what? I'm going to put a system in place or I'm going to collaborate with someone else on my team to put a system in place to do that. And that may look like, you know, Wes, you talk to 500 people and you have all of the leads funneling through to someone else on your team to follow up with them because that's their superstar strength.
Mm. No, that's brilliant. And I think one of the key things with most aspects of business is you can get so close to what you're doing that you can't see it as well. So,
Mhm.
and building out a team, certainly, I think that's why people like you are really helpful in that you've got the experience in in the specific field, but you can see where things might not be working quite as well as they could be because you've seen how others operate in similar spaces, and that's the beauty of niching as well. Like you have, do you say niche or niche
I
in
say
your part of the
niche.
work?
I don't know.
Yeah, so that's what it is. So the other piece too, and you mentioned it earlier as well. So for what I do and what I believe, trust is such a huge player in everything we do in business these days. It feels like trust is being eroded simply because there's just so much information that is mass produced at scale online these days. You can say anything glowingly about yourself, but once you look at reviews, these things that can't be easily manipulated, they're really important too. But I suppose in the construction field and those that work in the field, they often will know the reputation of of a company. Everyone kind of talks in the industries as well. You know, if you're in a small town, you'll definitely know everybody in the field. But if you're looking at the larger companies, everyone kind of knows the culture. But there might be sometimes a disconnect between what everyone knows and what the boss knows, because what's told to the boss is not necessarily the same thing that people are talking about over the toolbox, so to speak. Do you find that?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And here, so often, when we're doing climate surveys and folks are like, well, that's not true. I kind of step back and say, okay, so we just did a climate survey because we wanted to hear what folks had to say. So they were honest with us on it. Now we're discrediting them. How is this serving you and hitting your goal?
Yeah,
They
yeah,
don't really love that. But,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it's important because if we're going to ask folks, we have to be open to listening. Because
Yeah,
if we really want to grow as an organization or as a leader, it's so important to know what is being said. And guess what? Some of that may be a bunch of BS, and there's times where it is, and we know it is. But there's also going to be some grain of truth in that that is
yeah,
important for us to get curious about and to dig in a little bit further.
yeah. What do you think are some of the key common traits that are eroding trust within construction companies these days? Are there some common trends that you see that are just are not visible to the leaders that are behind the scenes?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple. And I don't know if it's because they don't see it or if it's because it has become so normal that we
Right.
just take it as normal. But how we talk about folks is a huge one, right? Like,
Mm.
how do we talk about our line level team members? Do we talk about them as if they're all replaceable and they're a cog in a machine versus a human? That has a huge impact, right? Um, do we do what we say we are going to do?
Mm.
So if we think about this, every time you say uh-huh or yes or sure, you're making a promise, right? Think about that. Every time you say uh-huh or yes or sure, I'll get it 2 by 2, you're making a promise. Every time
Yeah,
you don't follow through on that, you just broke their trust. So it's
yeah,
looking in the mirror to say, am I making promises that I'm actually keeping? And the answer is typically no.
yeah. That's a really interesting insight. So I suppose if you're as a company breaking the trust of the people that you serve, the end customer, maybe that's creating a perception that the boss isn't all that trustworthy with me either as an employee. I wonder if that's it's just something that's picked up.
Yeah.
Um,
And there's definitely be and both to that. And there's something else I want to throw out here that I think is incredibly, incredibly important. And that is we all make promises and then things happen, right? We have tariffs happening. We have production schedules changing. We have weather, like we just got 6 inches of
yeah,
snow over Saturday night, right? There's all
yeah,
these things that happen that is going to delay projects, right? It's going to delay what's happening.
yeah.
Here's the key. We just have to communicate. Hey, we had promised this to be in by XYZ, and it's not going to happen because of this, but we're shifting it to this. We're
Mhm.
giving a play by play of what to expect. And what that does is that actually builds trust. Did we miss our deadline? Yes. Did we
Mhm.
communicate it? Yes. Did we own it? Yes.
Yeah, I suppose just owning your mistake, either your mistakes or things that you can't predict or foresee. I mean, obviously that happens all the time. You know, one thing will delay you, and then that affects the next person in the process, and on it goes. So that's why why things often blow out in terms of time as well. So just so many variables that everyone appreciates. But I suppose you're right in that if you communicate that clearly to everybody involved, it's just building that transparency and that trust element that's so important in everything we do in
So one
businesses
other
these days. Yeah.
other piece of trust that I'd love to throw in is ensuring that we have the same definition, right? So, for example, I'm not coming up with a good one right now. Like it could be that we're making a promise to get something done on a job site to a specific quality level. Well, good to you as the property owner may mean, you know, it is 100% cleaned up, everything is wiped down, it's regraded, it is I could eat off the floor. That's what good means to you. Good to me means that all the measurements were done, the doors open and close, we've swept, it's good, right? So if we don't get clear, whether it's with our customer or with our team on what the definition of those things mean, we're setting ourselves up for miscommunication. Miscommunication leads to mistrust, right?
Yeah.
And look, I'm not saying like we need to like take everything and slice it and dice it and spend 20 minutes defining what everything means. That is not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is when we can get into the habit of, hey, this is what we're doing today, this is what the outcome looks like. Hey, Wes, could you repeat back to me how you heard the outcome looks like by the end of the day? What we
Mhm.
did is we just ensured we were aligned in the definition of what that was.
Yeah. Yeah. The leadership piece of building trust is so important, as you mentioned. So when you try to attract to be chosen, so that's the next piece of the podcast, to be chosen in your world, that's to be chosen so people want to work with you and to stay working with you. What are the key aspects that most what are the biggest mistakes people are making that are causing them not to be chosen? Firstly, that might be an interesting part to look
Yeah,
at.
I think some of that is clarity specifically around what are you going to do for me, right? Like, what is that outcome? And so, sometimes that's really clear with organizations and sometimes it's not. So that kind of gets down to the niching or however we want to describe it. But I think another piece of that is the reputation. So it's the testimonials. It's if I walk out my door and ask a question about Wes and I'm in a small community, what are they going to say, right? So that being chosen has a lot to do with can this firm complete and solve the problem at hand here, build a building, put plumbing in, you know, do a rehab, whatever that is. Can they do that? And how easy are they going to be to work with? And can I trust that it'll get done in the time and in the budget that we have agreed upon?
Yeah, brilliant. And so you help clients in all these key core areas that you've spoken about. Maybe speak a little bit about what your service offering is.
Yeah, absolutely. So we mostly work with organizations on developing that people strategy. So let's say you're growing, you're doing all of this work right now to bring some visibility and you're planning on doubling in size. We're going to work with you on what does the people strategy look like so you have the right people in place when that need comes into play. So that's one of the key things that we do. And a lot of that has to do with training programs along with strategy around it could be recruitment pieces of like we're not a recruiting firm, but we will work with you on what does that actual job description look like so that we actually know who we're hiring for and we can interview for that. So it's the leadership programs, it's the coaching of the leadership team, then it's setting that strategic structure in place.
Yeah, and is there a certain region that you service, or can you work for anyone? I suppose a lot of things can be done remotely these days, so you could probably work with anyone anywhere, really. Is that fair?
Yep, that's 100% fair. So we have most of our leadership programs are virtual. We do have one starting on January 6th, and then we'll have another one starting, I think, in May. So those are 8-week programs. So a lot of our programs are virtual. We also do a lot of, executive team meetings, team building meetings, those types of things that they're more fun and I believe more productive in person. But then a lot of times we'll follow up with that as virtual after that.
Yeah, obviously it's the construction companies you're mostly serving. Do you kind of deviate out of that space a little bit sometimes, or is it really
No, it's predominantly construction. My background, I have 10 years in nonprofit organizations. So every now and then I'll have a municipality or a nonprofit organization call me because of that background that I have. But for the
yeah,
most part, it is, in that construction, which my nonprofit experience had construction tenants throughout it. So that always makes that fun too.
brilliant. Yeah, this podcast has been awesome. There's probably I like to ask, is there a missing question? What should have we spoken about? What should have I asked you?
Oh my
Uh,
gosh, I love that question. One of the especially in the trades, it's how do we handle the attitudes or the complaints, because that kills your culture. So we believe that every complaint is just a poorly worded request. And so we have something called our tough talk blueprint. So if you're frustrated because you're hearing complaints, we don't have enough people, nobody wants to work anymore, I can't hire anyone else. We've got, any of those complaints to turn those into how do we actually create a pathway to get what we need? That's what the tough talk blueprint is.
yeah, brilliant. And so, what would be the next steps to engage or even just connect with you? What should the listeners do to find out more?
Absolutely. So on our website, you can download that tough talk blueprint, or you can follow me on LinkedIn at Traci Austin.
That's brilliant, Tracy. Thanks so much for your time on the podcast today.
Thank you.